Have you ever thought what it takes to master Turn 1 here at Motorland Aragon? Welcome to Turn 1 Tips. I'm going to give you two scenarios, the first one coming straight from the grid. Here I am, stood in pole position. As you can see, Motorland Aragon is probably the shortest run into Turn 1. Then, later in the video, we're going to talk about the approach on a flying lap. Let's go. Depending on your starting position, Turn 1 is a bottleneck. That means everybody's funneling into that one apex, trying to make a very small piece of tarmac. So it is so important to get a good start. Once I release my clutch, I'm not really thinking too much about track position until I get closer to the apex. Reason being, here at Turn 1 in Aragon is a left corner, but that leads onto a right corner. It doesn't necessarily mean that the inside's always the best, because in the inside, if you make the inside good, it puts you on the outside for Turn 2. I want to make a whole shot here. Go, stop everybody up, and then I've got clear track. But if that doesn't work, I'm not scared to let the brake off, run around the outside a little bit, because I know that's going to put me on the inside for Turn 2. Turn 1 is such a strange corner on the first lap because the start line is literally right behind the brake point on a fastest lap. We're going to approach here at 275 kilometers an hour on a flying lap, but we're only going to reach 175 kilometers off the line. That means I'm going to approach second, possibly third gear, depending on my start. One tip I'm going to give you though, for Turn 1 here at Aragon, is the second gear corner. But because Turn 1 on the first lap of a race gets so messy, go back to first gear. The most important thing about Turn 1 is a brake point. So you have to find that reference point that we talked about. My reference point here, depending on the wind direction, is always the bridge, plus or minus 4 or 5 meters. If the wind's really in your head, you can go past that to 200, 220 meters. But if the wind's really in your back, brake at the bridge. So now we're deep into the braking area. I'm using, at maximum point of braking, 12 bars of pressure. That's almost equivalent to 175 PSI. Can you imagine through them brake lines? Thank God we got Hot Juan on the case there. That makes the bike want to stop all in the nose, which makes the rear of the bike so light and in the air. Now the trick for the electronic engineer is to balance that lock feeling of the rear in the air and in sliding to give you some throttle, open the butterflies, but not too much, because you don't want to get pushed into this corner, because it really is all about stopping at the apex and setting up Turn 2. Now you've successfully made it to Turn 1, but when I say stop, please stop. Turn 1 is a slow corner, 90 kilometers an hour, and we use 56 degrees of lean angle. It's important not to run too deep in Turn 1 because we're going to set up Turn 2, so stop right at the apex, and we don't want to use any more than 60% track on the exit, because what happens here at Turn 1, it takes you the whole way to Turn 3 and up to Turn 4, and that's all uphill. So don't mess up Turn 1, because it'll have consequences. Turn 2, we're in second gear at the apex, and it's all about building speed, all up through this uphill section, Turn 2, Turn 3, and to Turn 4. So when I get the bike upright, right here in the middle of the track, I really put a lot of gas, almost to 100% throttle trace. Then I select third, and then it's all about changing, flipping direction into Turn 2, building speed all the way. So a little recap on what we've just seen. If I can give you 3 takeaways, it's reference point. Number 1, find your reference point. Mine's the bridge, so find yours. Number 2, make sure and stop for T1. You want to go in there fast, but it's a slow corner, so stop and get your track position. Number 3, do not use too much track on the exit here at Turn 1, because we want to stop it here, get track position, and use all the speed of our bike the whole way to T4. So I'm here on the front row of the grid, and what this start is all about is executing the perfect release of the clutch, because we want to carry that speed the whole way to turn one. Now here in Estoril, the start straight is possibly the longest we face on the calendar. Something to remember at Estoril is do not put yourself under stress at the lights, because we have such a long way to turn one. Everything funnels up, so you've got time to think about your braking zone for the first lap. But on a flying lap, you need to find that reference point again. For me, it really depends on the wind here at Estoril. Being so close to the seaside and the mountains in the back, we get a turbulent wind here. So define the brake point, but always keep an eye what direction the wind's blowing. We're going to arrive here at 310 kilometers per hour. That is 192 miles an hour. I'm stood here down in the braking area of turn one, and you can't see behind me, but this straight is so long. So reference points that jump out straight away are the curb that starts on the left hand side. Then we have the meter boards. The meter boards are on your left, just outside the track, but most importantly, the bridge for me again is a braking area. I always refer to the bridge, especially in a headwind, as that place where I must brake. It's always important to keep these reference points in your head, because when you go to a new track on the first laps, you can always refer to them. So make notes when you're walking the track and you get done with your day's riding. So here we are right in the braking area. The bridge right behind me is my first reference, especially in a tailwind. You can be up to 12 to 15 kilometers faster than when you have a headwind. That can adjust your braking area up to 30 meters. Turn one here for me, I use about 12 bar of pressure at maximum power. That's like decelerating from 6th gear right back to 1st or 2nd at the apex of turn one. On the approach to turn one, as soon as we hit the brakes, we're going to be braking for around 280 meters at 300 kilometers per hour. And that's back to 2nd gear for turn one. Here in Estoril, you might not see the undulations from the camera lens, but this turn one is downhill. So it's so crucial to get that engine braking right, because the forward momentum of the bike, it wants to put you over the bars and the G-forces. That makes the rear wheel dance in the air. So that makes it so difficult for the electronic engineers to nail turn one. So here we are right at the apex of turn one. Don't let turn one intimidate you. Even last year, my first time here, I was so in between gears. I couldn't settle on whether it was a 1st gear corner or a 2nd gear corner, but it is so forgiving depending on what bike you're on. On the outside, you'll see there's a lot of runoff, so you can experiment in the braking zone to go even deeper than you did the lap before, because you have some margin. At the apex, it's 80 kilometers an hour. That's 50 miles per hour in real money. What you can't see from the TV is at T1, the gradient is like a motocross berm. That means you can really force the front and throw it in there. The last tip I can give you here in Estoril at turn one is to set up T2. Always have it in your brain. Remember, the more meters we cover here on the exit of turn one, it makes a bigger change of direction, because even though this curb's jumping out at us into the track, we want to straight line this as much as possible to set up T2. So a quick recap on this week's turn one tips from Estoril. Reference and brake point, ever so important here, because we want to brake as late as possible. And remember, we have some margin here with tarmac on the outside of T1. So use that and play around to find the best reference and brake point for you. Secondly, turn one is super cambered, so don't be too stressed getting in there with a lot of front brake on, and use trail braking to slow you down last part of the corner. And last but not least, stop in turn one. Try to straight line that curb across the kink in two to set up T3. And they are my secrets to turn one here in Estoril.